The year was about 2000. I graduated from high school in 2001. And I'll be talking about that a little bit more in coming videos because I am now in my 25th year. I'll be having my 25th high school reunion. But 2001 was when I graduated from high school. And when I graduated from high school, my original plan was I was going to be maybe. My original plan was to be a sports journalist. And I wanted to get paid to talk about sports and be the guy that just talks about football, basketball, whatever. And that is not the way it went. God had. And then a little bit later, I got this idea that I'd start making movies. I'd be a filmmaker. That didn't happen. But it was through an experience where I went to a ministry. It's called Impact. It was a ministry of a Baptist church that was near Des Moines Area Community College, which is where I was going to college at the time. And I went to this night, and one of the people, actually, I think it was the pastor himself. Yeah, it was the pastor. He came up to me and said, "Hey, if you were to die tonight, where would you go?" And I said, "I'd go to heaven." He said, "Well, why is that?" I said, "Well, because I am baptized." And if any of you have ever had this type of conversation, you know that just saying I was baptized is not a sufficient answer. And so this led to a little bit of discussion. I was given this a pocket New Testament, and I went home, and I ended up reading through the entire New Testament in 1 week. And it was in that moment that God kind of kicked me in the rear, woke me up, and awakened in my mind a desire to go become a pastor. And so I found myself in a situation. I got to figure, okay, I need a bachelor's. I need to have a bachelor's before I could become a pastor. Maybe even go to seminary. So I started looking at where I was going to go to school, and finally I came to the idea that I was going to go to a Concordia. And I ended up going to Concordia University, Wisconsin, Mequon, to be in the city of Mequon, just north of Milwaukee. And it was a great experience. And I was glad I went there. Some of you are probably in that point in your life, that stage in your life, you're trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I want to go to seminary. I'd like to be a pastor. And you're trying to figure out where I'm going to get that bachelor's. And by the way, I'm going to get it probably in a video, probably in June or sometime in June. I will probably do a video about pastoral formation, especially in light of what we're going to be talking about at the Synod Convention, but I don't want to go there yet. My videos, I try not to dive into Synod politics, Synod issues, but I will every now and then. But anyways, the point here is I just kind of want to give you an idea of what was the seminary journey for this person. But if you're going to seminary and you're trying to figure out what to do, is a Concordia the essential choice? And the answer is no. If you want to, it is definitely acceptable to go to a state college or something in your area. The only thing I would recommend is, if possible, get your Greek and Hebrew out of the way, or even just Greek. Get one of those languages out of the way so you don't have to worry about that when you get to seminary, so you don't have to do summer Greek or whatever. If you could find a way to do it, do it. It will help you a lot. But I did go to Concordia, and the only thing I would say, if I could go back and redo it, I probably would have picked a different major. And that's only because of what happened in that summer. In my last video, I talked about that in 2012 I graduated from seminary, but I did not get a call until 2013. I began to get worried that I wouldn't get a call. And so I'm like, man, my pre-seminary studies this is not going to be a good backup. So that's one thing I would suggest, is get another major. Don't do pre-seminary, because do some of the pre-seminary studies. Take like the Lutheran worship classes. Take the take the Lutheran worship classes, because the Lutheran worship class at like CUW is excellent. Past Dr. Maschke, I learned way more about worship at Concordia, Wisconsin than I did at the seminary. And that's the honest truth. That's extremely valuable. Take Greek and Hebrew, get that out of the way, where it's a slow down process that sticks in your mind a little bit better and it has a little stronger root and it'll help you when you get to seminary and you have to start taking all those Old Testament and New Testament classes. So do that type of stuff. But still, I would recommend finding another major and take some of those electives that you would use for ministry. That's just my thought on it. And the other thing is, if you are going to go to a Concordia, if you grew up in a Lutheran school, I would suggest when you get to Concordia, this is something I wish I'd have done when I was there, is find a way to find community outside of the walls of Concordia. And I say that or ways to connect to people outside of Concordia. Because one of the things that happens is when you're at Concordia, you go to Concordia, Wisconsin. I went to Concordia, Wisconsin. And then I went to Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. So that's 8 years. Actually, I was 4.5 years at COW. So 8.5 years that I was in the Lutheran bubble. And what ends up happening is you begin to forget what it's like to be around people who are not Lutheran. So, and if you went to a Lutheran school your whole life, that bubble is expanded for however many years you're in that Lutheran school. So you're gonna have to find a way to deal with it, so you know how to interact. If you were homeschooled, even more so, you're gonna have to find ways to know how to interact with people that are not in that Lutheran bubble, because it's going to be helpful to train you, to teach you how to communicate with the people that you're going to be called to serve. So I went to Concordia, Wisconsin. I did the 8.5 years worth, and so like I said, if I could have done something different with CW, I would have found a way to do that. I also probably would have worshipped at other churches more than I did. I went to the seminary. Or the Concordia, Wisconsin services on Sunday morning every week. And part of it was because I was the usher pretty much every week, because we could find ushers otherwise. But, yeah, I would probably have gone to a church in the area instead. So, there's things like that I would have done differently. But I greatly valued what I learned at CUW. There's a lot. I developed some great friendships, had a lot of good memories. We had a lot of fun times playing. A lot of it involved playing Halo and World of Warcraft. It also involved the heated debates that we would have in the cafeteria. And admittedly, sometimes I missed classes because we'd lose track of time while we were in these debates, and we're talking these theological discussions, and we got heated. We got heated in some of those debates. But the thing is those discussions help you grow. Those are things that help you learn. And this is kind of tapping into a little bit into what I was just talking about, what I'm going to talk about in June. I'm talking about pastoral formation and why that in-person, living in residency with each other is so valuable. It does have value. Is that those moments when you're sitting there, you're debating with each other, you're discussing the matters of faith, you're just discussing matters of ministry. And yeah, you get heated, but you kind of need that. You need that experience. I think and so that's, I'll talk about pastoral formation later. But yeah, I had a lot of those debates. I had some of those at Concordia Seminary, but I had a lot more at Concordia, Wisconsin. But it was I had great memories there, and it was I greatly valued my experience. We had there was really good professors there. I graduated in 2008. So in 2009, I entered into Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. So take it back. I graduated from CUW in 2009, so I got my years mixed up. So I graduated in 2009. I entered into seminary 2009. But it's 2000, I think. I might have. My brain is not working the best it is at the moment, and this is the downside of doing raw recordings. But as I entered into seminary in St. Louis, and so the question might be asked, like, what made me choose St. Louis? Because in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, we have we had two seminaries. We have Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and then we have Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. So we have two different seminaries. And, why did I choose one over the other? Well, when I first wanted to become a pastor, there was a Concordia Seminary rep that came to Memorial Lutheran Church in Ames. And I remember going up there to visit with him and talk about, which I really wish that we had seminary reps coming around states more. I live here in a very densely Lutheran area, and I don't think we've ever had a seminary rep in our area since I've been a pastor. And I've been a pastor for 13 years. It's probably a conversation to be had. And it could be that they just don't have the resources or whatever, and that means we as a church body need to find a way to give them those resources, because we need that. We need people to be going and visiting. The Concordians need to start. I mean, that's the whole issue. We don't send reps. That was so important for me to go up to Memorial and visit with that seminary rep. I don't remember who the seminary rep was. I probably, if I looked it up, I should remember who it was. If I looked up the names, I'd probably remember who he was. He was an older guy. But anyways, I remember visiting with him, and he convinced me to come down to St. Louis for one of their visit days. And I went there, and that was the second big thing. The first big thing was the connection. They made that initial connection. The second big thing is we made that trip. We made that visit to the seminary. This is why I've been talking with Concordia, Wisconsin. I've been talking with the Concordia St. Louis, not the seminaries. I haven't talked with them. Maybe I should. But I talked with Concordia Seward, Concordia St. Paul, Concordia, Wisconsin. I told them, listen, you should be sending reps to our area. We're in a very densely Missouri Synod Lutheran area right where we're at, here in Ida Grove. And, I go into our schools and I see all this stuff for Dordt College, Luther College, and yet we're in our population, in this county, Missouri Synod is the largest denomination. So is the county to the south of us, the county to the east of us, the county to the west of us, or southwest of us. It's not quite the largest, but it's the second largest. So, we're in an area where it's very densely Missouri Synod Lutheran, and our Concordians don't come visit. Neither do our seminaries. And I think that's really odd. It's why aren't we fostering all these Lutherans around here? Why aren't we encouraging them into church work? And they're like, well, we find it's more important, more valuable that they come and visit. I agree, the visit's good, but you need an initial contact. You don't just go willy-nilly visit some place that you know nothing about. You have absolutely no information about. I mean, why do you go to Disney World? I mean, people that just say, hey, you're going to go to Disney World. The reason is people have some concept, some connection, some idea as to what Disney World is, and they want to go. And, of course, you got all the advertisements and all that. But if you have absolutely no point of contact except for the pastor doing his darndest, his best effort to try to explain it to them, but you have no actual connection from the Concordia itself beyond maybe the youth gatherings and conferences, you're not going to get anywhere. You got to make that initial connection so that they could be encouraged to go visit someplace. That's what happened with Concordia Seminary. That was one of the very helpful things that hooked me. That's what got me to Concordia, Wisconsin. Concordia, Wisconsin came down to, I felt I needed to go to Concordia, and I looked at all of them, and I think I looked at Concordia River Forest and Concordia Chicago. Those were in Concordia, Wisconsin, were basically the two I looked at. I didn't want to go to Seward because I didn't want to go to Nebraska. I say that humorously because I just this year I try to work on some of our kids to go to Concordia Seward because it's not far from us, and they have the same reaction. It's Nebraska. They don't want to go to Nebraska. Um, oh boy, my own years coming back to bite me. But anyways, uh, anyways, I went to make that visit, and this was before I went to Concordia, Wisconsin. I went to Concordia. Made a visit to St. Louis. And the thing was, is through the years, St. Louis kept contacting me. I would visit it with the seminary reps every single time they came to visit. But here was the thing: both seminaries would send someone to CUW. While I was going to CUW when I was a student, both seminaries would regularly send a representative, and I would visit both. I visited both of them every single time they came. And they usually took us out for a meal, and they're pretty good meals. It was a really wonderful treasure that they did for us. But the thing that was really interesting was I was at Concordia, Wisconsin for 4.5 years. I never got contacted from Fort Wayne. I never got a mailing, nothing from Fort Wayne. And this is the thing, is if you're going to send reps, you got to make sure you follow up on it. I did not get a contact until the very last year of seminary. Of Concordia, Wisconsin. And at that point, I pretty much had decided that I was going to go to... So I pretty much decided, by the time they started visiting me, I had already pretty much decided I was going to go to St. Louis. And I did actually give consideration to Fort Wayne. I looked at Fort Wayne's campus. I liked how it was very designed for community, because I do well in a good community atmosphere. When I went to CUW, in my rooms, I had one of the reasons why CUW was so good for me as a person, it helped me grow so much, was I had great roommates when I was at the Peace Center, which no longer exists, sadly. And that includes, current pastor over in Wall Lake. I had some really good roommates. I had some good times with them. That helps. When I was in Oxford, when I ended up at my last year, I had my own dorm, but it was a really tiny dorm room. So what I did is I just kept the door open, and that opened up conversations with other people that are in the dorm with me, and we had some great conversations, great interactions, and so that was very valuable. And so I learned and I realized that I needed that community to keep myself going, to encourage myself, and so that was kind of appealing as I was looking at that Fort Wayne was a little bit better than that from what I could tell from the promotion. I also kind of liked what they had for their curriculum. I thought that looked intriguing, but again, it was down to the last year, and so I ended up going to St. Louis, and part of it is St. Louis is close, a little bit closer to home. That played a little bit of a factor, but not a huge factor. So I ended up going to Concordia, St. Louis. And coming from CUW, one of the weird things that happens to us is we come to CUW, if you come from Concordia, us Concordia guys, I think we had a little bit of an ego coming in, because we'd gone through a Concordia system, which means we had classes on, books of the Bible, on ministry. We've done our Greek and Hebrew, all that stuff. We're thinking like we are super smart, and we're going to succeed so much. We're going to be so much better than those other people. Okay, we didn't actually think exact that word, but we kind of have a little bit of a ego on our shoulders. Well, the thing that happens in that first day of seminary is they kill that ego very quickly, because you sit in on your first class and you realize really quickly you don't know squat. 4.5 years in a Lutheran university, and now first day at seminary, you realize you don't know as much as you think you do. You know very little, and it's a lot of work. I mean, when you get to Concordia Seminary, understand it is graduate studies. It's graduate level education. And I know there are those, I know I'm stepping into that issue that I'm going to talk about in June about pastoral formation, but there are some that want to lower the qualities for being a pastor. And I saw a quote about it, and I just saw it. It was on YouTube, but I don't know who it was. It was something I marked to watch later, but I closed the window before I watched it. But it's this little line that says, "We don't need to fill pulpits. We need pastors. We need to form pastors." And that's a very important distinction. Don't fill pulpits just for the sake of filling pulpits. Form good quality pastors. And part of that is that education. Throughout much of the history of Christianity, pastors have been very well trained, very well educated. And I know somebody's going to say, well, the disciples didn't get an education. And I'm like, yeah, they did. They walked around with Jesus, the Son of God, for at least 3 years. That's better education than any of us could ever get. All right? They watched him raise the dead, cleanse lepers. They watched him do the ministry. So I think they got a major leg up on us. That was definitely an education. So don't give me this whole, they didn't get educated. Yeah, they did. And the second generations, they got educated by the guys who witnessed this stuff. So like the apostolic fathers, so the first generation after the apostles, they were educated by guys who witnessed Jesus, who were eyewitnesses all this. So don't give me this hogwash that they weren't educated. They were. They were very much educated. They're educated better than us. Okay? But here's the thing. Through the history of Christianity, pastors have been really well trained, well educated. And in much of history, they were amongst the most educated people in any given community. And for some reason, we have in this day and age where they're trying to lower those standards. And we're talking about people's souls. We're talking about people's salvation. This is something we should take with absolute care. And so when we go to seminary, like your first day, the thing we talk about, like you'll hear this from seminary students, is you basically read a book a week. And they're not little books. They're not like, hey, you gotta read this in 1 week. Although we did have to read a bunch of these. In case you don't know, this is a CTCR. And it was just happened to be handy and I pulled it out. But yeah, we had to read a bunch of CTCRs. They're really good for future. Some of them are really good if you're having troubles getting to sleep. So are some of the books. And that's the thing, is some of the books we're reading, that is the truth, that they are books that you read when you're struggling to get to sleep. It gives meaning to one of my professors who told me that in order to, when he was studying, and he had to do a lot of studying on a doctoral thesis or whatever, in order to keep awake while reading, he would stand up right next to a desk so that if he fell asleep, his knees would buckle and hit the desk and he'd wake back up. Like, yeah, some of the books that we read as pastors are pretty dry. I won't lie about it. Pieper's Dogmatics, those green books that we all had to learn, they can be pretty dry at times. That doesn't mean that there's nothing good in them. There's incredible value. They're not just wasting our time. You understand, the professors are not just wasting your time by learning these books. You're reading stuff that you need to know. It's just, unfortunately, sometimes the people who are writing it don't have they have kind of a dry writing style. It's just what it is, but it doesn't take away the value of what is being taught. So, but you learn a lot. You need that learning, and you got to be humble to realize you don't know anything. That's an important thing. Do not come arrogant and say, "Oh, I know everything. There's nothing you can teach me." No, you come in ready to learn, ready to grow. All right, and that was my first time when that was like what it was like when I got to seminary. I mentioned a little bit ago that my seminary experience was, when I was trying to choose seminaries, I wanted to pick a seminary where there'd be a strong community. And I was hoping that I'd still get that in St. Louis. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't have that in St. Louis. not for my first 2 years. So I'm what you call an introvert, and this is something. Admittedly, this was something that I learned from the seminary, because the seminary nowadays does actually give thought to the psychological reality of a pastor, who you are mentally, who you are as a person. And one of the things you learn about is one of the things we had to do right before seminary was we had to do the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And so that means we had to learn about introvert versus extrovert, sensing versus intuition, thinking, feeling, judging, perceiving. So that's the 4 letters. And we took a test, and it was through this that I began to learn a lot about myself. Is that all of these letters actually have influence. So if you're introvert versus extrovert, extroverts are people who they gain energy from conversation. So when they're having conversation with people, they build up that energy. And they get more energetic, more energized. They're really good at small talk, things like that. Introverts give out energy when they converse. So when they socialize with people, they're expending their energy. And they're not very good at small talk, but they're really good at deep conversations. And so I'm on the introvert spectrum. And because I struggle with small talk, I need a community to be in. And this is something I learned. In my first 2 years of seminary, I was in the solo dorms. I was in the back corner, where nobody walked by. Like I did the thing that I did when I was in my last year at CUW. My last year at CUW, what I do is keep the door open, and people wanted to pop in and say, "Hey, how's it going, man?" They could. But they couldn't do that when I was at St. Louis and I did try that, but there's 2 problems. One, the door was really heavy, and it's hard to hold open. I mean, I even tried my BDAG to hold it open, and BDAG is big. That wasn't good enough. So that was the first problem. The second problem is no one really walked by. No one really passed by my room, not very often, except for the guy that was across the hall from me. And so if I wanted to connect with people, I basically ended up spending a lot of time in the lounge of our dorms. And one of the reason I did that was because I thought maybe I have people that I'd be able to interact with and talk with or whatever. And I could go long periods of time with no one going by. I could go days without really having any interaction with people, and it did wear on me mentally. And so I will say that and there was a period in my second year that was very difficult emotionally, because of something that was going on with a girl, and I didn't really have somebody to fall back on to help me out of that. And so basically what I decided, and that was because of those 2 years. So I went to vicarage. My vicarage was in Georgia, and my vicarage was good. I could talk about vicarage probably in another video some other time. But when I got back, I made a point that I was not going to live. I was not going to have my own room. I was going to have a roommate. And because I was going to have a roommate, that meant I was going to be in isolation. And the isolation dorm at CSL. And when I went there, my last year was so much better, because I had someone I could regularly talk with. If I went into the lounge, the way isolation is designed, everyone kind of runs into each other, and it fostered community so much better. My first 2 years, I felt like a hermit. My last year felt like I had a community, and I feel like the brotherhood, a ministry that was built that year, was much stronger, and I very, very much was grateful for that last year. And so, like I said, everybody's experiences could be different. The cafeteria, we had the cafeteria, we have the chapel where we have a lot of interaction with people, and I had good conversations with people there, um, and we have the chapel service at the daily chapel. If you go to seminary, do your best to take advantage of it. And I wish I could say that I did. I was good at doing that. I wasn't. I kind of went in phases, but do take advantage of it as long as you can, because you won't have that when you become a pastor. It'll be very hard to come by as a pastor. So that's kind of some of it. I mean, like, trying to think about my classes that I really enjoyed in that first year. I liked the introduction to history. I had Dr. Herman as the professor. That was another one. He was one of those professors when I took his class. He really got me to realize I didn't know much. That was helpful. When Dr. The other class was hermeneutics, I found to be very valuable to really begin to think about how we interpret scripture. I believe that the book "What Does This Mean?" I don't have it in this room. It's in the old office that I take way too long to move stuff from. But anyways, "What Does This Mean?" was a book that we had to read at the seminary, and it's about biblical hermeneutics and interpretation, and all that. And I found those three basic points of the book is not very readable without a teacher. It's not very helpful without a teacher. That's true of Veltz's Greek book as well. It works if you have a teacher to teach it with you. But the three principles, the three texts, that simple principle that you understand that every scripture, and by the way, this isn't just scripture, this is any form of literature, any form of art. There is three texts every time. There is the physical text, the actual words are on the page. There is the text of the writer, the author and his audience, like trying to figure out what's the culture that they're writing in. And then the third text is you. And so and the big task is not to let the third text, you, get into the way of the other two texts. And that I found to be a very, very valuable understanding for interpreting any type of literature. It's not a rule just for the Bible. It's a rule for pretty much anything. But I found that to be very valuable. The end of the year was my preaching. When I first got to preach. I did a fieldwork church, by the way. My fieldwork church was Trinity in Orchard Farms. It was just outside of St. Charles. It's an older congregation. They had a school. And, it's a nice congregation. The downside to it was 45 minutes away, which meant that it kind of limited how much you're able to do with it. And so we also had to do cross-cultural immersion. We had to do a institutional module, I think it was, so I had to work with I think it was a Lutheran home. I can't remember what it was called, but it was near St. Charles. I worked out there, and I'd visit people. That was not a good experience for me, because they just there's you just got to show up and just cold call all these people. I did not enjoy that experience at all. That was probably one of the worst experiences at seminary, and especially because it's tied to you going on vicarage and stuff like that. And it's like, the experience would have been better if we had some guidance. And that was a big problem. I didn't have any real guidance from anyone for what to do. You just show up and do something. And I'm like, do what? Nobody's even modeling or showing me what to do. They're just like, here you go do it. I'm like, do what? And I felt completely underprepared, under knowing what to do. I don't know what it's like now, and hopefully it's better. But I absolutely hated that experience. And some of the people at CSL, I was kind of slow on finishing up that because there's no organizations like, okay, show up this day, this day, this day, or whatever. You're completely on your own. You were not given any real direction or guidance as to what to do, and it made it very difficult to finish it, and made you not want to do it because I didn't feel like I was getting anything out of it. I felt completely drained every time I went because I didn't know what I was doing. If I had guidance, I think it would have been some guidance or some mentorship. I believe it would have been very beneficial to me. I did a cross-cultural immersion trip because there was also a requirement to do a cross-cultural module, so you experience other cultures. I ended up going to Southern California for a cross-cultural immersion trip. It was a 2-week trip over spring break, and we ended up going to, and it was really good because I don't know how much you know about Southern California, but Southern California is probably the most diverse place on the planet. I mean, when we first got there, the guy that was the host of it, he gave us this list of demographics and where Southern California or Orange County ranks compared to the rest of the world, like in terms of like what it ranks for population for people who are Hmong, or the number of population who are Chinese, or all these different statistics. It's like insane, the incredible diversity of that city. And so every day we would, part of a day would be devoted to various ethnicities and different cultural groups. So maybe one day we would be talking about, we'd go to a Vietnamese church. I stayed with a Korean family, and that was a great experience. Not to mention the incredible food they gave us. We went to a Chinese ministry, went to a Hispanic ministry. We visited an African American ministry, and of course we got so much good food. Like, because if we went to an African American church, we would eat food. We would eat soul food. If we went to a Vietnamese church, we ate Vietnamese food. If we went to a Korean church, we ate Korean food. I mean, we were fed really well, but it gave us it was a crash course in a multitude of cultures. And I think it's valuable because you never know where you're going to end up as a pastor, and to add to it. And the other part of it is you don't know if you're going to end up in a place where the culture around you changes, where people all of a sudden, I'm going to use Denison to the south of us. Denison has a very sizable Hispanic culture, Hispanic population. You have people who are Sudanese. You have people are from Somalia. So you have these different populations that are showing up in your community, and that cross-cultural immersion experience is helpful to get you to think, okay, what do I do with this culture that has now emerged within my community? How do I interact? And so that was it was a great experience for me. It was not a vacation, if you're wondering, because that's why actually a couple of years ago I went to California. I wanted to go see some of these places I couldn't see because it wasn't a vacation. It was very much it was a very good learning experience. So that's kind of that was kind of a lot of what my first year of seminary was. That first time, I remember the first time I got to preach. That was great. And then getting to preach at my home church over the summer. Those were good experiences. So this kind of, the leading up my first year. Second year is a lot of the same. I didn't have as much of the modules. That second year, you're just kind of more focusing on your studies. Third year is vicarage, and I'll probably do another video on vicarage. So, hope this is informative as you think about seminary life, education, and the Lutheran Church, to becoming a church worker. So blessings to you in Jesus' name, amen.